Welcome to this very first Ask Me Anything session. I'm recording this in my temporary All Things IC office, as I obviously can't go to my current office at the moment as we are in lockdown here in the UK. Thank you to everybody who's got in touch with me to send me your questions. You can still get in touch. You can email me at rachel@allthingsic.com, tweet me at allthingsic, or go to my website allthingsic.com/contact, and you can send me a message via that channel. So thank you to all the comms practitioners from around the globe. I know how hard you are working at the moment. Thank you to everyone who's got in touch with me, particularly Liz, Zane, Emma, Helen, Simon, Caroline, Johanna, Kate, Mark, Catherine and Matt. Thank you for sending me through your questions. Now, some people I've gone back to in person because there are very detailed questions about their particular organisations, and the others I've got here. Stay tuned to the very end of this video to discover something that's coming up very soon and for you to get ahead of the game and to add your name to something. So I'll share more details on that in a moment. So let's turn to the first question. Hi Rachel, I'm finding the need to change tone and feel of comms frequently during this time. For example, from telling colleagues that we are losing a great deal of contractor resource who are business critical to us continuing certain projects, to encouraging our team members to think about well-being. Would you advise having a quick reference guide to hand on different types of tone for comms? Does such a thing already exist that perhaps can be tweaked to fall in line with any brand guidelines? Thank you for that question. The short answer for me is yes. I would recommend that you have a one-page guide to tone of voice that you can use inside your organisation, particularly to help you determine which channel to use when. Now, when I think about channels, and really the crux of that question for me is around understanding what to use when. So which particular type of channel do we use for which particular type of message? And the way that I do that, and you'll know this if you are a reader of my All Things IC blog, or if you've attended an All Things IC masterclass in person with me, is I use a channels matrix. I'm going to grab one. If you have attended a masterclass, you will have one of these books, or perhaps you've bought one from me via my website. If you turn to page 14, there is a channels matrix, and I'll overlay this video with the image so you can see it. Essentially, it maps out your channel, the category, the purpose, who it's for, the direction, the frequency and the owner. In this particular situation, I would encourage you to add an additional column for tone. So when you're looking at your internal communication channels, overlay it with a column for tone. So which particular tone works well for which particular channel. So going back to the question, thinking about the contractor resource which is having to be scaled back, what's the appropriate channel to use for that sort of communication, and thinking about the well-being initiatives, where works best for that, which channel works best for that. So I encourage you, if you have a channels matrix, to look at that, look at the tone that you have for each of your individual channels, because they will vary and it will help you make the right decisions. And if you don't have a tone of voice guideline, do look into that. And if you don't have a one-page guide, do look into creating that. I've blogged a number of times about tone of voice, and I'll share some links with you so you can find out much more about this topic. So thank you for that question. Let's turn to the second question. Hi Rachel, so my question is something quite specific, but hopefully something you can help with. I'll try. I'm in the position of starting in a newly created role in a newly merged hospital trust in the UK just as COVID-19 took over. I suppose it's a question around priorities. How to juggle dealing with a crisis and keeping staff informed and safe with building and establishing the internal comms team. Well, it's currently me and one other colleague. We have 4 roles to recruit into, which in itself is also a challenge. My goodness, what a time to start in a new role. Congratulations on your new role. Sounds like you've got a heck of a lot going on there. So the question for me comes down to priorities, keeping staff informed and safe, as well as building and establishing the internal comms team. This is where we need to get organised. So think again about a channels matrix, plot out how internal communication happens in the organisation, and particularly look at the cadence, the rhythm of the internal communication. So what's the frequency? What channels do you use to keep employees informed, and which channels do you use to keep them safe? Now, it might be you use one channel for everything, but when you're thinking about priorities and how to make the best of the channels that you have, I find writing everything out in one place a really helpful way to enable me to understand what to use when. The next question I've got is from Zane Newton. Hi Zane, thank you for your question. He says, as tough as the COVID-19 experience has been, it's also been an amazing opportunity to build community in our organisations. What do you see as the keys to maintaining that community in a post-COVID world? Well Zane, thank you for your question. I think you're absolutely right. We are seeing community being built in ways that we couldn't have imagined, or ways that we dreamt of, but our organisations weren't ready to imagine it yet. Maybe there were barriers in terms of culture, in terms of technology, in terms of our leaders' reluctance, particularly when we think about people working from home, for example. There's been a real reluctance in many organisations. And what we're seeing now, and part of that reason was a feeling of a loss of community. If we can't see our people, how can we reach our people? Fast forward to now, and oh my goodness me, we have had to adapt and flex and evolve our approach, particularly when it comes to internal communication, to maintain that sense of community. So my advice in this situation is to gather your evidence. Understand what's working well. What is working extremely well within your organisation at this point in time to build community? What does community mean for your particular organisation? Now, we've all seen examples online of people doing Zoom calls, face-to-face video calls with their teams, and virtual quizzes and yoga sessions and ask me anything sessions, all sorts of different ways that people are interacting together to maintain and build community. So in order to know what to keep, I encourage you to think about the language that you're using. So for example, I find it quite unhelpful to think about a pre-COVID world and post-COVID world. I've certainly noticed a shift in messaging, which isn't about post-COVID-19. It's much more around living with coronavirus. So think about that for your organisation. There are many people who are accepting and realising that we won't really have a return to normal for many different types of organisations and businesses. It won't be possible to operate in the same way. It's very much business as unusual. And I've blogged about this recently, and I also blogged about how to prepare your employees for the future. So to answer your question, I would capture what is it that's working well in terms of community in your particular organisation. Ask your employees, do a mini audit if you like. An audit means to listen, to hear. This is the mindset that you need to have. So gather that evidence, gather your feedback, bring it together and look at what does it mean to have community in our organisation and what is relevant and applicable to carry on doing. You might find you need to make adjustments to your communication channels, for example, but have a look at what it means for your organisation. Hope that helps, Ed. The next question I have here is along similar lines, and it says, as an organisation, we are starting to think about adjusting forwards. Again, think about the language that we're using. We're adjusting forwards. Lots of questions starting to be asked by our employees, and an assumption from some that we will go back to both the office and the old ways of doing things once restrictions are lifted. Neither are likely to be the case. Again, think about this and think about what does business as unusual look like now, and what do we think is going to happen in the future. Now that's really hard to answer. There are so many unknowns. If you've studied change communication with me, or if you've read my All Things I See blog, you'll know when I communicate change, I map out the known knowns and the known unknowns. In this particular situation, there are so many unknowns, and my encouragement to you is to map out what is it that you know. So what would the return look like for your organisation? Start to write those questions out, start to really capture them, so then you can look at it and make informed decisions. I guarantee you there are more unknowns than knowns at the moment. Hope that helps. The last question I'm going to address today says, hi Rachel, how do you influence, persuade or convince your top exec to get their arms around people a bit more in such challenging times? It's not the natural culture where I work. We are quite task and performance focused, but now is a time to be a bit more warm and fuzzy, but it's hard to change overnight. What a great question. So true. I've been blogging and recording content about leaders and encouraging them to be visible, particularly virtually visible at this point in time, getting them comfortable being uncomfortable, displaying empathy. But to your point here, how can you encourage them to be warm and fuzzy when actually it doesn't come naturally to them? and they're very much task focused and performance focused. So my advice in this situation is to really understand who you're working with. So what's the natural communication style for your leaders, for your exec? Where do they thrive? What are they good at? If it's not a usual thing for them to do, to come onto camera and do one-to-one style like I'm doing today, don't make them do that. If they're more natural and they come across better in written communication, encourage them to do that. It's important that they show up. It's important that they check in with your employees, but don't put them in situations where they're obviously uncomfortable, because the message will sound hollow, it will come across shallow and not authentic, which is the opposite of what we need right now. So my advice is understand who you're working with, understand where they thrive, what good looks like from a communications perspective. If they're great on video, do that. If they're great in a written format, do that. If they're great unscripted, encourage them to do that. But they need to be visible. That's the key thing. If it doesn't come natural to them to be fuzzy and warm, then find the right person who can be fuzzy and warm. It might be you end up doing a fireside chat between an executive and your people director, for example. Your exec might not be warm and fuzzy, but maybe there are other people in your organisation who naturally are. So how could you create the conditions for them both to thrive, where you get across the warm and fuzziness? So there's lots of ideas there. I hope that helps. So thank you so much to everybody who sent me in questions so far. I hope that was helpful. I'll share the links to all of the blog posts that I mentioned and resources that I mentioned. The last thing to leave you with is what I promised at the very start, which is news of something that's coming up. I am recording online masterclasses at the moment. I've been scribbling away in the background with the help of Debbie Aurelius, and we're going great guns. We're doing really, really well. There is an online masterclass waitlist which is open. So if you are interested in learning with me remotely, wherever you are in the world, then do check out the link that I'll share with you and do add your name to the waitlist. You will find out first. We've got some news coming very soon. You'll find out first when they launch. And finally, stay safe, keep well, wash those hands. If you have questions to send to me, please do get in touch. Rachel@allthingsic.com. Tweet me at allthingsic, or find the contact form on my website allthingsic.com/contact. Thanks so much. Bye.